Good morning and welcome back to Ladybug Grace. I greatly appreciate you tuning in as I journey through the Bible, and especially right now we're in the book of Ezekiel. But before we begin our next chapter, our morning prayer. Father, as I read and receive your word, may it deeply be rooted in me, so when difficulty comes, it will be your word that encourages and strengthens me. Amen. Excuse me. So as I mentioned, we're in the book of Ezekiel. We're going to start chapter 47 today. The river of healing. Then the man brought me back to the entrance of the temple. There I saw a stream flowing eastward from beneath the temple threshold. This stream then passed to the right of the altar on its south side. The man brought me outside the wall through the north gateway and led me around to an eastern entrance. There I could see the stream flowing out through the south side of the east gateway, measuring as he went. Excuse me. He led me along the stream for 1,750 feet and told me to go across. At that point, the water was up to my ankles. He measured off another 1,750 feet and told me to go across again. This time, the water was up to my knees. After another 1,750 feet, it was up to my waist. Then he measured another 1,750 feet, and the river was too deep to cross without swimming. He told me to keep in mind what I had seen. Then he led me back through the river bank. Suddenly, to my surprise, many trees were now growing on both sides of the river. Then he said to me, "This river flows east through the desert into the Jordan Valley, where it enters the Dead Sea. The waters of this stream will heal the salty waters of the Dead Sea and make them fresh and pure. Everything that touches the water of this river will live. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will be healed. Whenever this water flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shores of the Dead Sea, fishing all the way from Engedi to Eneglaim. The shores will be covered with nets drying in the sun. Fish of every kind will fill the Dead Sea, just as they fill the Mediterranean. But the marshes and swamps will not be purified. They will be sources of salt. All kinds of fruit trees will grow along both sides of the river. The leaves of these trees will never turn brown and fall, and there will always be fruit on their branches. There will be a new crop every month without fail, for they are watered by the river flowing from the temple. The fruit will be for food and leaves for healing." Boundaries for the land. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Follow these instructions for dividing the land for the 12 tribes of Israel. The tribe of Joseph will be given 2 shares of land. Otherwise, each tribe will receive an equal share. I swore that I would give this land to your ancestors, and it will now come to you as your inheritance. The northern border will run from the Mediterranean toward Hethlon, then on through Lebo Hamath to Zedad. Then it will run to Berotha and Sibraim, which are on the border between Damascus and Hamath, and finally to Hazar Hadakon on the border of Haran. So the northern border will run from the Mediterranean to the Hazar Enan on the border between Hamath and the north and Damascus to the south. The eastern border starts at a point between Haran and Damascus and runs southward along the Jordan River between Israel and Gilead, past the Dead Sea and as far south as Tamar. This will be the eastern border. The southern border will go to the west from Tamar to the waters of Meribah at Kadesh, and then follow the course of the brook of Egypt to the Mediterranean. This will be the southern border. On the west side of the Mediterranean itself will be your border from the southern border to the point where the northern border begins, opposite Lebo Hamath. Divide the land within these boundaries among the tribes of Israel. Distribute the land as an inheritance for yourself and for the foreigners who have joined you and are raising their families among you. They will be just like native-born Israelites to you, and they will receive an inheritance among the tribes. All these immigrants are to be given land within the territory of the tribe with whom they now live. I, the Sovereign Lord, have spoken. Oops. I do this a lot. Chapter 48. Divisions of the land. Here is the list of the tribes of Israel and the territory each is to receive. The territory of Dan is in the extreme north. Its boundary line follows the Hethlon road to Lebo Hamath and then runs to Hazar Enan on the border of Damascus, with Hamath to the north. Dan's territory extends all the way across the land of Israel from east to west. Asher's territory lies south of Dan's and also extends from east to west. Naphtali's land lies south of Asher's, also extending from east to west. Then comes Manasseh south of Naphtali, and his territory also extends from east to west. Give me 1 second. South of Manasseh is Ephraim, and then Reuben, and then Judah, and all whose boundaries extend from east to west. South of Judah is the land set aside for a special purpose. It will be 8 1/3 miles wide and will extend as far east and west as the tribal territories, with a temple at the center. The area set aside for the Lord's temple will be 8 1/3 mile long and 6 2/3 miles wide. For the priest there will be a strip of land measuring 8 1/3 mile long by 3 1/3 mile wide, and the Lord's temple at the center. This area is set aside for the ordained priests, the descendants of Zadok, who obeyed me and did not go astray. When the people of Israel and the rest of the Levites did. I'm sorry, I'm having a real problem with my stomach this morning. I apologize. I keep stopping. It will be their special portion when the land is distributed and most sacred land of all. Next to the priest's territory will lie the land where the other Levites will live. This land allotted to the Levites will be the same size and shape as that belonging to the priests, 8 1/3 mile long and 3 1/3 mile wide. Together, these portions of land will measure 8 1/3 miles long by 6 2/3 mile wide. None of this special land will ever be sold or traded or used by others, for it belongs to the Lord. It is set apart as holy. An additional strip of land, 8 1/3 mile long by 1 2/3 mile wide, south of the sacred temple area, will be allotted for public use. Homes, pasture lands, and common lands, with the city at the center. The city will measure 1 1/2 miles on each side. Open lands will surround the city for 150 yards in every direction. Outside the city, there will be farming area that stretches 3 1/3 miles to the east and 3 1/3 miles to the west along the border of the sacred area. This farmland will produce food for the people working in the city. Those who come from the various tribes to work in the city may farm it. This entire area, including the sacred lands and the city, is a square that measures 8 1/3 miles on each side. The areas that remain to the east and to the west of the sacred lands and the city will belong to the prince. Each of these areas will be 8 1/3 mile wide, extending in opposite directions to the eastern and western borders of Israel. So the prince's land will include everything between the territories allotted to Judah and Benjamin, except for the areas set aside for the sacred lands in the city. These are the territories allotted to the rest of the tribes. Benjamin's territory lies just south of the prince's lands, and it extends across the entire land of Israel from east to west. South of Benjamin's territory lies that of Simeon, also extending across the land from east to west. Next is the territory of Issachar, with the same eastern and western boundaries. Then comes the territory of Zebulun, which also extends across the land from east to west. The territory of Gad is just south of Zebulun, with the same borders to the east and west. The southern border of Gad runs from Tamar to the waters of Meribah and Kadesh, and then follows the brook of Egypt to the Mediterranean. These are the allotments that will be set aside for each of the tribes' inheritance, says the sovereign Lord. The gates of the city. These will be the exits to the city. On the north wall, which is 1 1/2 miles long, there will be 3 gates, each one named after a tribe of Israel. The first will be named for Reuben, the second for Judah, and the third for Levi. On the east wall, also 1 1/2 miles long, the gates will be named for Joseph, Benjamin, and Dan. The south wall, also 1.5 miles long, will have gates named for Simeon, Issachar, and Zebulun. And on the west wall, also 1.5 miles long, the gates will be named for Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. The distance around the entire city will be 6 miles. And from that day, the name of the city will be The Lord is There. That is the end of Ezekiel. So like I normally do, we'll go back to the beginning and read what it was all about. The author is Ezekiel. The date was 6th century BC. The content is Ezekiel, who grew up as a priest, was carried off to Babylon with the Jewish exiles who were deported in 497 BC. There he became a prophet of God. His message was one of coming judgment for those remaining in Jerusalem. And so his preaching was not well received by the other Jews, who, like him, were captives in Babylon. After his prediction came true in 586 BC with the destruction of Jerusalem, the people listened more attentively. His message changed at this point from being one of unbending judgment to one of comfort and hope for the future. The worst had come. It was now time to make plans for starting over. Ezekiel saw himself as a shepherd and watchman over Israel. As a shepherd, he was to protect the people, but as a watchman, he was to warn of danger ahead. The theme is Ezekiel's message is based upon God's holiness, which never changes. This is both a promise and a warning. It is a warning because God will indeed punish evil. It is a promise because God will also remain faithful to his people. The book of Ezekiel shows God's unbreakable promise fulfilled in both respects. The city fell according to God's promise because of Judah's sin. The city will be restored according to God's promise to care for his people. Well, thank you for joining me through this particular book of Ezekiel, the journey. It was 48 pages, 48 chapters long. We're going to start Daniel tonight because I'll be back on tonight. I wasn't able to record last night. I couldn't put all my all into it, and I believe in not recording unless I can give 100% attention to it. So that is why I did that. So I will be back tonight with starting Daniel. So until then, I hope you have a great day and a blessed day. And until later tonight, bye.